The door slammed. I was outside in the blizzard. Jess laughed. Her brother mocked me. I begged. She didn't care. Everything was a lie. What happened next? Shocking. My name's Liam, and I've had better nights than the one I'm about to tell you about. I'd been married to Jess, my wife of 6 years, and life had been, well, it had been fine. Not perfect, but whose life is? We'd had our ups and downs, but for the most part, we were doing what married couples do. You know, arguing over the thermostat, deciding on takeout, figuring out the best way to avoid her mother's weekly phone calls. We didn't have kids yet. Our plan was to enjoy the us time a little longer. It was one of those things where you put it off just long enough to realize, oh, it's been 6 years. And one day, Jess's mom, Sharon, the queen of passive-aggressive comments, dropped a bombshell. She decided that she and her husband, Rick, would be staying with us for a few weeks. I wish I could say that I had been expecting this. But no. Instead, I walked in from work one night to find Sharon's suitcase in our living room, as if she had just moved in for good. Surprise! Jess had said. Her face lit up like it was Christmas morning. I told Mom she could stay here for a bit. You don't mind, do you? I didn't mind. Not at first. It was supposed to be a few weeks. But weeks turned into months as they completely took over. They didn't just occupy the guest room, they practically took over our entire house. Sharon started rearranging furniture like it was her own, and Rick would pop open his beer at 2 p.m., acting like he lived here longer than I did. It wasn't just them. Jess's younger brother, Ben, a man-child who couldn't even manage to pick up after himself, had been living on our couch for the last 6 months. He worked part-time at a coffee shop and played video games the rest of the time. And every time Jess tried to talk to me about it, it was the same thing: tears, accusations that I didn't appreciate her family, and their family, excuse. I started avoiding home. I'd stay late at work, even though my job wasn't demanding. I'd do anything to not be there. But it all came to a head one brutal January night when a storm rolled in. It was one of those blizzards where the weather station is like, if you're outside, you're an idiot. Stay inside or you might die. I had worked an overtime shift that night, trying to get away from all the noise at home, and by the time I finished, it was 11 p.m. The roads were barely passable, and I could barely see 2 feet in front of me, but I knew I had to go home. So, I trudged through knee-deep snow for almost 30 minutes to get to my front door. And there it was, my key wouldn't work. I tried again. Nothing. Okay, that's weird, I thought. Maybe the lock was frozen. So, I knocked. I knocked again, louder this time. And then I saw Jess through the window. Her silhouette standing there, staring back at me. I waved, relieved. Finally, she's noticed me. Maybe she had gotten tired of the silent treatment I'd been giving her. I motioned for her to open the door. She didn't. She didn't even seem concerned. And then, to my horror, I saw her smile. I'm not talking about a warm smile. I'm talking about a smile you give someone when you know you're about to make them miserable. It was the kind of smile you give when you've just pulled off the most twisted prank you could think of. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jess? I called out through the window. Jess, open the door, it's freezing out here. She just stared at me. And then her brother Ben appeared beside her, holding a beer, and grinning like it was the funniest thing in the world. You're locked out, man, Ben said, his voice full of too much amusement. No losers allowed tonight. Family only. I stood there, completely stunned. My heart started pounding. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, but my rage was starting to burn hotter than the icy night around me. Jess, I said, voice shaking, this isn't funny. Let me in. It's -15 out here, and there's 2 feet of snow. You can't be serious. She was. She was serious. Ben leaned closer to the window, his breath fogging up the glass as he snickered. Freeze to death, worthless idiot. I stared at him, my throat tightening. I turned back to Jess, waiting for some sign that this was a joke. She was laughing. Actually laughing. Laughing with Ben, high-fiving him like they were sharing a joke that was hilarious. I stood there for another 30 seconds, my phone at 2% battery, my car running out of gas, and the storm raging all around me. Something inside me just snapped. Not in the way where I screamed or banged on the door like a lunatic. No, it was quieter than that. It was the moment I realized something that should have hit me a long time ago. She didn't care. She didn't care about me. Not the way I thought she did. The life I had been living? It was a lie. So, without saying another word, I turned around. I didn't slam my fist against the door. I didn't yell at her or Ben. I just walked back to my car, climbed in, and drove away. It was 1 a.m. when I finally found a 24-hour diner, a place called Mel's, that still had power. I sat in the corner booth nursing the same cup of coffee for hours. The waitress, a no-nonsense woman named Josephine, kept filling it up, and I appreciated it more than I could say. I was too exhausted to think, but I knew that whatever was happening to me right now, whatever had happened that night, had changed something. And I didn't know what was coming next. But I knew I couldn't go back to what I had before. Not anymore. The next few days were a blur. I didn't contact anyone. No texts, no calls. I just stayed away. Brandon, my old college buddy, didn't ask questions when I crashed at his place. I think he knew something had happened. He knew it wasn't just a fight. 3 days later, when I finally checked my phone, I had 47 messages. 57. It was a mix of texts, voicemails, and DMs from Jess, her parents, and Ben, all begging me to come home. At first, I felt guilty. But that guilt quickly turned into something else. I wasn't going back. Not like this. I didn't respond to Jess right away. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. It was one of those moments where everything feels so clear and so complicated at the same time. The anger was still there, burning in my chest, but so was the betrayal. The idea that I had spent years building this life with someone, only to be treated like garbage in the freezing cold, well, that was something I wasn't going to forgive easily. But part of me wondered, why had I been putting up with it for so long? The idea that I was just a placeholder in her life, a guy who could pay the bills and provide a place for her family to live? It hit me harder than I expected. She had always complained about us time being non-existent, but that didn't explain why she let her family bulldoze through every aspect of our lives. Why was I the one to get pushed to the side? I sat in Brandon's apartment for 3 days, avoiding any contact. I wanted time to think. Not just about the storm, not just about what Jess had done, but about everything. The relationship. The house. The future. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon that I finally felt ready to look through the pile of messages. Jess's texts had started off with desperation, then turned to pleading, then panic. I could feel the guilt creeping in. Had I done the right thing? Had I made the right choice walking out into the snow? She was my wife, our marriage wasn't supposed to end like this. But deep down, I knew I had made the only choice that made sense. Then there was the voicemail from her mom. I played it back, hearing Sharon's voice crack. Liam, please. I don't know what's happened, but we're all so worried about you. Jess needs you. You need to come home. This has gone too far. It was like a punch to the gut. Sharon was never this nice to me. Her sweet tone didn't match the woman who had barged into my home, rearranged my things, and made snide comments about my job. As I listened to the voicemail, something clicked. I didn't just need to leave this situation, I needed to destroy it. I needed to end the control, the manipulation, the lies. It was time to get even. But more than that, it was time to take control of my life again. No more letting them dictate everything. No more living in their shadow. And that's when I realized what I had to do next. Monday morning, I walked into a cell phone store and switched my number. Completely. I took everything, every connection I had to my past life, every shred of a relationship that could still tie me to Jess and her family, and I cut it off. I wasn't playing nice anymore. I wasn't some sap to be walked all over. I didn't need them in my life. I was done. But there was more. A lot more. The first step was getting the legal side in order. The last thing I needed was Jess or her parents trying to clean me out while I wasn't paying attention. I called up a lawyer, someone who had helped Brandon through his own divorce, and made an appointment for later that afternoon. While waiting for the meeting, I spent the morning at a coffee shop, doing some deep research. I started digging through old bank statements, looking for anything that might help me. It was clear to me now, Jess had been siphoning money from our joint account for months. The $7,800 I'd found was just the tip of the iceberg. I knew I had to get those funds back, and if I was going to fight, I needed leverage. I found exactly what I needed. Jess had been using her family's emergency fund as an excuse to quietly transfer money into an account she controlled. I couldn't believe it. All these months, I thought things were tight because of the bills. But no. She had been playing me for a fool. When I walked into the lawyer's office that afternoon, I was ready. The lawyer was a sharp woman named Rachel. She was direct and knew how to navigate the sticky issues of financial manipulation. I gave her all the documents, proof of Jess's financial theft, the phone records showing the number of times her family had contacted me while I was locked out in the snowstorm, everything. Rachel's eyes flickered over the documents. "You have a solid case, Liam," she said, looking up at me. "But you'll need to act fast. This could get ugly." "I'm not afraid of ugly," I replied, a little too harshly, but I didn't care. I need a divorce. And I need it now. I don't want anything from her except for my share of the house and the money she's taken. Rachel nodded. We'll start drafting the papers. But remember, you have leverage. The video from the night you were locked out? That's a big deal. If it ever comes down to it, you can use that in court. She's made her bed, and now she's going to lie in it. That night, I went home to my now empty house, my mind racing. The silence was unbearable. It felt wrong. But at the same time, it felt like a weight lifting off my chest. At 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a new message. It was Jess. Please just come back. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over to the kitchen counter where I had left a printed copy of her financial records. I stared at them for a long time. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the house. It was everything. The trust had been broken. Jess didn't see me as a partner. I had been a tool for her family to use, a place to live and a paycheck to take advantage of. I was done. By the time Thursday rolled around, I had done everything I needed to. Jess was still bombarding me with messages, but I wasn't playing her game anymore. I had my lawyer on standby, my finances were being protected, and most importantly, I had a clear mind. The chaos of the past few days had cleared the fog, and I was finally starting to see everything for what it really was, a game, and I was no longer going to be a pawn in it. Jess hadn't heard from me directly since I left the house. She didn't know where I was, and for the first time in a long time, she had no control over me. That was an incredibly freeing feeling. I didn't feel the panic anymore. I didn't feel like I was walking around on eggshells, worrying about her mood or her family's opinion of me. I had learned the hard way that if you want peace, sometimes you have to break the damn door down. And I was about to do exactly that. I'd spent the past week getting my ducks in a row. I had my finances secured, and the lawyer had already started the paperwork for a divorce. The real battle, however, was what came next. It was clear Jess's family thought they could control me with guilt. But after years of letting them do whatever they wanted, the joke was on them. I wasn't afraid of their manipulation anymore. I was going to hit them where it hurt, and they had no idea what was coming. I hadn't just been gathering legal ammo. I'd also been working behind the scenes to set up the ultimate payback. I know, it might sound petty, but it's funny how quickly people forget who they really are when you stop playing nice. Friday came, and Jess finally agreed to meet me. She insisted on coming alone this time. She had no idea that the game was already over. I had a plan, and it wasn't just about getting out of this marriage with my dignity. No, it was about making sure Jess and her family never treated anyone like they had treated me again. We agreed to meet at a park near the outskirts of town. Neutral territory. She showed up on time, looking just as haggard as I expected, but still clinging to that look of I didn't do anything wrong. I watched her from a distance as she sat down on a bench, nervously checking her phone. She didn't see me walking toward her, didn't even notice when I sat down across from her. The silence between us felt thick. Jess seemed like she wanted to speak first, but she didn't know how to approach it. She never had to before. She was the one who always controlled the conversation. Now, she was the one scrambling for the script. You look different, I said, finally breaking the silence. She stared at me, blinking in confusion. What do you mean? You don't look like the woman I married, I continued, keeping my tone neutral but firm. You look smaller, like someone who's just been living in other people's shadows for too long. I didn't wait for her to respond. I wasn't here to play nice anymore. She shifted uncomfortably but didn't say anything. I wasn't going to give her the chance to apologize for the 100th time and ask if we could work things out. This was a conversation about the truth, not her rehearsed sob story. Let's get straight to it, I said, pulling out a folder I'd been holding onto for the past week. I opened it on the bench between us, and her eyes flickered down. This is a list of all the things you've done that you're not going to get away with. The money you took, the lies you told me, the way you manipulated me for the last few years, this stops today. Jess opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand, silencing her. You're not going to talk your way out of this. I've already spoken with the lawyer, and I've got enough evidence to make sure you won't even get a penny from this divorce. The money you took, the house that you and your family thought was yours, you can kiss it all goodbye. There's no more pretending. No more games. She went white. I could tell she was caught off guard. But at this point, I wasn't sure what was more satisfying, the shock on her face, or the realization that her grip on me was finally gone. I don't know what you want from me, Liam, she said, her voice faltering. I've already apologized. I told you it wasn't like that. It's just that. Just that what? I interrupted, leaning forward. Your family has been bleeding me dry for over a year, and you let it happen. You let them take over our life, our home, our future, and for what? So you could keep the peace? So you could make sure they didn't get upset with you? She stayed silent. I didn't marry them, Jess. I married you. And you stood by, doing nothing while your brother, your parents, everyone ran all over me. You know what they did to me? They locked me out of my own house during a blizzard. And you laughed. You laughed at me through a window while I begged you to open the door. Do you remember that? Do you remember why you laughed? Her face turned red as she looked down at her hands. I never thought it would go that far, she whispered, barely audible. I leaned in closer. That's the problem. You never thought. And I'm done being a second choice. Done being the punching bag for your family's bullshit. You've had your chances, Jess. I've spent years trying to make it work with you. But I see it now. I was never part of the plan. You weren't choosing me, you were choosing your family. And you didn't even have the decency to hide it. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And I'm done. I don't care how much you cry, how many times you apologize. The money's gone. The house is mine. And your family is gone from my life. Forever. Jess opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was speechless. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt her, it was just that I had nothing left to lose. I had given her everything. I had stood by her while her family tore us apart. But not anymore. Not today. I'm filing for divorce, I said, matter-of-factly. And I'm doing it today. Don't bother trying to come up with some sob story. You're going to have to figure out how to put your life back together. Without me. She looked like she wanted to argue, but there was no fight left in her. There was nothing she could say that would make a difference now. I stood up, not waiting for her to speak. As I turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The air didn't feel as heavy anymore. The weight I had been carrying for years was finally gone. And I wasn't going back. The next few days were a blur. I filed the divorce papers the morning after the meeting with Jess. It wasn't a dramatic spectacle. It wasn't a Hollywood movie where the papers are flung dramatically across the table and a huge confrontation ensues. No, I walked in, handed over the documents, and filed them with a quiet, almost peaceful finality. That was the thing about being done. When you're truly done, it doesn't require drama. You don't need to scream, shout, or throw things. You just leave. You move forward. The peace comes in the quiet. The next few days were spent in a daze of paperwork and phone calls. The lawyer I'd been working with, Rachel, was incredible. She made sure I was protected every step of the way, gathering all the financial records and preparing to file a claim for the stolen money. We were also taking action to ensure that Jess's family had no legal claim over the house. It was mine. My name was on the deed, and I wasn't letting them take that away from me, either. But the emotional part of it? That was still raw. Still, after everything, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had been a part of this family for years. I had invested so much, too much, in Jess, in the life we built. Even after everything that had happened, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to fix it. Was it all just a mistake? Was there some way I could have done something different? But deep down, I knew the answer. Jess had made her choice a long time ago. She had chosen her family over me. She had chosen convenience, drama, and control over love and partnership. And no amount of wondering would change that. On Friday afternoon, I sat in my car outside the house, staring at the front door. There was a knot in my stomach, a tightness I couldn't shake. The house was quiet now. No more yelling, no more passive-aggressive comments from Sharon, no more late-night video games with Ben. It was just still. I had everything packed, ready to start fresh. I had already taken most of my things, including the essentials, clothes, important documents, my favorite books. But I knew there was something I had to do. Something that needed to be done before I could truly move on. I walked up to the door and knocked. Jess answered almost immediately, and for the first time in days, I actually saw her face. It wasn't full of anger or bitterness. It was just empty. She looked tired, small. It almost felt like she was waiting for something. Waiting for me to say something. "Hi," I said, my voice neutral. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, as if she were waiting for me to tell her everything was going to be okay, that we could somehow fix this. But I wasn't going to lie to her. "I need you to leave," I said flatly. "You and your family need to be out of this house by tomorrow." Her expression faltered. "Liam, please. No. No more pleading. No more excuses." "I've made my decision," I interrupted. "You're not going to manipulate me anymore. You've made it clear where your loyalty lies, and it isn't with me." I could see her throat tighten. I could see the tears in her eyes, the frustration in her hands as she wrung them together. But it didn't matter. I couldn't be that guy anymore. The guy who let himself be walked on. The guy who stayed quiet and let things slide for the sake of keeping the peace. I want you out by tomorrow. I'll be checking the house, and if you're not gone, I'll take legal action, I said, firm but calm. This is over, Jess. You and your family need to leave. Her breath hitched in her throat, and for a moment, I thought she might finally speak the words I needed to hear. I thought she might finally own what had happened. But no. She just stood there, silent. I turned and walked away without another word, knowing this was the last time I would ever walk through that door. I didn't look back. The next few days passed like a blur. I stayed at Brandon's place, keeping my distance from everything. Jess and her family were gone by the time I returned to the house on Sunday. I hadn't heard from them, but I didn't need to. What happened next wasn't as dramatic as I had imagined it in my head. Jess didn't fight for the house. She didn't put up a fight for the divorce or the finances. She didn't even contest it. It was clear now that the damage had been done. It was too far gone to fix. I took the time to change the locks and make the house mine again. I had a deep clean done, got rid of any traces of her family, and rearranged everything. Funny how something as simple as changing the furniture could feel so empowering. I even replaced the couch that her brother Ben had constantly stolen the remote for. But the real change? The real shift happened inside me. I felt lighter. I felt freer than I had in years. I also made a few calls. The first was to my sister, Dorothy. She had been the one person in Jess's family who never tried to control me. She had been the only one who spoke up when they tried to push me around. We met up that evening, and it was like reconnecting with a long-lost friend. "You look different," she said with a raised eyebrow, after I told her everything that had happened. "Happier?" Strangely, yes, I admitted, feeling a grin tug at my lips. "I'm finally getting rid of the dead weight." "You deserve better than her," Dorothy said, as if she'd read my mind. "You always have." I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. I'd already made my decision. Jess wasn't the woman I thought she was, and I wasn't the person I had been when I met her. That night, I got a message from Jess. "I'm sorry. Please, let's talk. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I didn't reply. It wasn't worth it. I had said everything I needed to say already. The divorce papers were filed by the end of the week, and within a few weeks, everything was finalized. I was free. And it felt incredible. I started over. I redecorated, reorganized my life, and began doing the things I had forgotten about in the chaos. I reconnected with old friends, took up a hobby I used to enjoy, painting, and even started dating again. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. I was no longer the man who let his wife's family walk all over him. I was someone else now. Someone stronger. Someone smarter. Someone who knew his worth. And that, in itself, was a victory. It's been exactly 3 months since I walked out of my old life, and I can honestly say this is the first time in years I've felt completely in control. The house is mine again, and I've spent the last few weeks doing exactly what I should have done years ago, living for me. The first few weeks were hard. Not in the way I expected, though. I thought I'd be a wreck, crying every night, pining over the life I had lost. Instead, I found myself strangely calm. The anger I had been holding on to, the bitterness, the frustration, it all dissipated. I let it go. And with that, came a sense of peace I didn't know was possible. I started doing things I had put off for years, things I had forgotten I even liked. I picked up my guitar again. I joined a gym. I even started cooking for myself, which might sound silly, but for someone who had lived in a constant state of avoidance and self-sacrifice, these little victories meant everything. I got a dog, too. A pit mix I named Banjo. He was a rescue from the shelter down the street, and he was everything I needed. Loyal, loving, and in desperate need of a warm bed and a good owner. Banjo and I have settled into a nice routine. I wake up, take him for a walk, grab a coffee, and come back to a quiet house. A house that feels like home again. I did have one moment of hesitation, though. A few weeks ago, I ran into Dorothy at a local cafe. We'd been chatting regularly since everything happened, and she'd been an incredible support during all of this. But when I saw her that day, she looked a little different. More like the person I had once known. I hadn't expected it, but for a split second, I wondered what it would have been like if we had been together from the start. If maybe, we could have been something more. But that moment passed quickly. I'm not in the market for a rebound relationship. Dorothy and I are family now, good friends, with the occasional heart-to-heart and the usual sibling-like banter. No more, no less. That's the way it should be. I also made sure to cut off all ties with Jess and her family. At first, I thought about reaching out to let them know I was doing okay, give them the closure they apparently needed. But no. That would have been me falling back into old habits, giving in to the drama. Jess had made her choices, and I had made mine. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't want them to have any power over me. And then, something strange happened. One day, I got a message from Sharon. Her message was short and to the point. I know we've had our issues. But I want to apologize for how things ended. You didn't deserve any of that. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at the message for a long time. The woman who had spent years making me feel like I didn't belong in my own home was now apologizing? I didn't know how to react. For a moment, I thought about confronting her about the way she treated me, about everything I had put up with. But instead, I just deleted it. It wasn't worth it. The last tie to that old life had been severed, and I felt lighter than I had ever felt before. A week later, I got a call from Brandon. He had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, and even though he didn't understand everything I'd been going through, he was always there when I needed someone to talk to. His voice crackled through the phone as he asked, "Hey, man, you want to catch a game this weekend?" I grinned. Hell yeah. I hadn't been to a game in ages. Before everything had gone downhill, we used to go to the local bar, grab a beer, and watch football together. It was something I used to enjoy, something I had almost forgotten about. And now, as I sat in my car, heading out to the game with Brandon, I realized that I was finally living for myself. I wasn't tied down anymore. I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. When I walked into the bar that evening, the familiar smells of popcorn and beer hit me, and I felt a rush of nostalgia. The guys were already there, teasing each other about their fantasy football teams, just like old times. It felt normal. I felt normal again. Not some guy weighed down by a toxic marriage and a family that never appreciated him. No, I was Liam. The guy who could start fresh. The guy who could laugh without feeling guilty about it. The game was fun, but more than that, the night felt like a personal victory. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just free. When I got home that night, Banjo was waiting by the door, wagging his tail like crazy. I smiled at him, walked over, and gave him a scratch behind the ears. My life wasn't perfect. I still had bills to pay, I still had messes to clean, and I still didn't quite know how to cook pasta without making it overdone. But I was starting to feel like I could take on anything now. I wasn't a doormat anymore. I wasn't some guy who sat back and let others dictate his life. I was someone who knew his worth. Someone who had learned that there was power in walking away. And as I sat on the couch that night, watching the TV with Banjo curled up beside me, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. I had made it through the storm. And now, I was building something that was all mine.